very naughty question about symbols like a swastika. Well, can they be redeemed? Well, I think in the way that that symbol is worked into the world, global culture, the way that's incised on the cortex of everybody's brains, it's very hard to think about a swastika in terms of anything other than power.
We're talking about kids who, like millions and millions of teenagers who can't watch a movie without subtitles, can't focus on a movie for an hour and a half, can't watch it without subtitles in their native language. And
I haven't heard that about subtitles before. That's really interesting.
oh, really? That's a big, yeah.
There's been a number of knockoff Gasda plays over the last 2 years where people are like, I rented a loft, I wrote a play about people hanging out downtown, why am I not? And they come after, like, they'll troll me, or kind of like I'm like their bugaboo, like their rival, or they try to start these rivalries with me, and I'm like, I hope you do well, but you can't recreate the circumstances.
It wasn't working that much. My job required me to work like 2 or 3 days a week, and I just didn't spend any money. Like, I don't know. It's a totally lost way of life. Like, I really didn't need to spend much money. I didn't spend much money. I don't think I ordered a cab or paid for a cab till I was 27 or 28.
I mean, it's one banana, Michael. What could it cost? $10?
I already had actors get very upset with me for writing a few essays, which had nothing to do with my theater, which didn't particularly praise Trump, but look forward. Basically, my thesis was that I looked forward to the next era of American culture, and that I thought it would be a less repressive one, and that it was a somewhat sophisticated argument.
I mean, let me ask the audience.
That looked back at the 1830s, the age of Jackson, and how that, even though I kind of claimed that even though the American transcendentalists in New England most likely didn't like Jackson, it was an era of real American cultural regeneration and renaissance. And so that, and I compared the present era to that era. And I had to have like a 4-hour conversation at a bar with a few much younger actors recently graduated from college and definitely came of age in a progressive monoculture, and were shocked that I didn't vote or endorse Kamala without really reading what I wrote or even looking at my voting record, whatever. I think they were also shocked to find that in our theater world, or at least the world of the Brooklyn Center for Theater Research, they were a minority, meaning that their point of view was not really even the most common one. And I had to remind them that I was the only person who'd really signed my name to anything related even remotely to politics, but that a lot of people around them most likely also broadly agreed that it was not the election was not a tragedy, and that there might be some good things to look forward to.
And so New York, you really felt like you were saying fuck it to Cuomo, you were saying fuck it to Fauci, you were saying fuck it to local busybodies who would yell at you in elevators and on the subway and getting your takeaway beer at a pub. So, and as I say in the piece, like, this was really not a strongly ideological time. It wasn't a denominationally ideological time. People weren't going around identifying as Republicans or Democrats or even right or left. I mean, some were, obviously, but I think broadly speaking, it wasn't about right or left. It was about keeping a certain spark alive.
I guess I'm last here. So I guess I'm qualified to answer your excellent question about submissions. I do think I have about 20 produced plays in New York and a play collection that came out last year, and I have 3 books coming out in 2025.
I might book.
I think I have basically a 0% chance of winning any kind, even though I've been in the New York Times, sort of, I have all the things that you can sort of have, or you would have had in the past. I have all the kind of constituent parts to have launched like a Broadway career, have kind of gotten publishing accolades, and I think in a non-blind process, I just, for various reasons, I have just a 0% chance of being nominated, of receiving an award, which is not, I'm not here to complain about that at all.
Still, like, you'll see these I see this all the time. Like, conservatives will be like, the New York Times is a rag that's like blah blah blah, and the minute they're on the bestseller list, they're celebrating on their feeds, and I'm like, you guys, like, wouldn't you not care if you think so lowly of this magazine and newspaper that you're constantly trashing?
Yeah, it's a vast game, and you have to be very strategic, and you have to
know, you have to be able to talk to people and communicate. I mean, I think I was in the New York Times because people liked me personally and thought I was talented, and they got to the point where there was so much buzz around the play that it would have been dumb to not.
When I started writing plays 10 years ago, I had no idea that there'd be any political dimension to my work whatsoever, which is why there is now a political dimension to my work.
So I think the goal of the Brooklyn Center is for theater research is to practice theater. It's to practice this kind of theater, this third space theater, and to tie it back to the tradition that it's always been a part of. Also to connect that again to these more to philosophy and critical theory, things which I think we're both influenced by experimental theater, but also influence experimental theater of any kind. And experimental, I just mean breaking the proscenium, breaking the Broadway mold. So for me, that's really important because to me, that's also an example of a liberal space in terms of function, not ideology. And so I think that's an important distinction. We're not practicing politics there in a concrete way, but I think by promoting a space and just letting theater operate without ideological guardrails, to me is liberalism in practice. And that means
And so I never really had a chance to become a normal playwright. I never really had a chance to see my work go to a big stage. I think if I had applied to MFA programs, I would have been rejected. Again, not because my plays were hyper-radical, but because there was just a total absence of a categorizable politics.
Because tech companies released people to work from home, there was a wave of basically what I'd call tech libertarians without strong politics, but with strong philosophies.
And often my actors will say, I agree with you on whatever issue. And even if that issue is me just saying, we're going to let different kinds of people into the space, and we're going to keep our own politics strategically ambiguous, because the theater can't have a politics. 50 people can't have a singular politics. It can only illuminate the different kinds of tensions that are latent within us.
Yeah, there were these little signifiers of right-leaning politics, like trad calf e-girls and things, but it didn't feel hyper-reactionary to me. It felt, if anything, hyper-libertarian and hyper-anti-authoritarian and hyper-Agombinian, but it didn't feel like it didn't feel like the Republican National Convention, or it didn't feel like Claremont Institute or something. It felt like people who had gotten humanities degrees and maybe had programming skills talking about what the future looked like. And then all of a sudden you find yourself being labeled fascist or reactionary, and you find your friends being lumped into that. And it felt really weird. And I felt really naive about how I just felt naive.
And I thought that being truthful and being an artist were sort of the only things that mattered. That was in my naive bubble as a kid and as a teenager, as a college student, just reading books and dreaming of the big city and dreaming of being an artist. That was the criteria that I thought mattered. Now, that was very naive. What I learned relatively quickly is that self-identification, that way of projecting an artistic self into the world, was sort of considered to be dangerous. There was something about presenting yourself as an artist without an ideological agenda in New York, in America, in 2015 or so, 2014, that made people feel unsettled and, in a way, always produced the question, well, what do you believe? What's the point? What's the takeaway?
It is the case, and there are a lot of copycat plays now of copying the sort of loft format, so to speak. And I don't want to mean to exclude people who want to start doing theater. I think people should start doing theater. But you can see how people there's an extreme hastiness and lack of interest in the deeper dimensions of theater making, which I think is really important.
Puritanical? I don't think it's puritanical, because that is not what the voices that I read. They're saying, okay, go ahead and have sex, but don't abuse me. Yeah. Don't mistreat me. I think you're coming from a very particular point of view. And I think there are a lot of other people that would say that, there are many other factors other than a woke culture that have contributed to, the curtailing of pleasure.
I think maybe it's more like a 2x2 than for me the
Sounds a little puritanical, but
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!